Hi everyone, my name is Noshin Zainab and I welcome you all to KiwiTech's 808 workshop for startup and entrepreneurs to help them navigate the challenges of starting a business, making it sustainable and taking it to the next level. Today, we have the mentor sessions on Investor Push, How to Prepare and Sell to Investors by Fred Cohen, Managing Member, Angel to Exit. From transparency to results, the five dysfunctions of a team, plus one, Doug Bloom, CEO, Dab Ventures. Before we begin with our session of the day, I would like to invite our Senior Manager Strategic Partnerships at KiwiTech, Karandeep Sodi, to give a quick overview of the company. Over to you, Karandeep.
Nausheen, thank you so much for the introduction. Just stay on. Let me just share my screen. There was some problem. All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Nausheen, for the introduction and, of course, giving me the opportunity to present KiwiTech in front of our esteemed guest today. Well, to start with, KiwiTech is a global community of innovators, investors that are mentors as a part of the ecosystem and also enterprises along with corporate communities. Now, to date, we have more than 500 plus portfolio companies as a part of the ecosystem. And over the past almost more than a decade, we managed to build an investor network of more than 3,000 investors. Now, through this investor network, we've helped our partnering founders raise more than 100 million US dollars worth of capital for, of course, their startups. And as a part of the ecosystem, we also have mentorship as a very integral part of our ecosystem. We have more than 300 mentors. Of course, most of them come from the investor network that we have, but we do have a lot of successful founders as a part of the mentor network as well. Now, KiwiTech also invests, technology development services as an investment in a lot of organizations, just to provide a better run rate on the cash portion of the tech dollars that they have in the bank. Now, we've invested more than 100 million US dollars in that front as well, just to help support, accelerate the growth of a lot of organizations within our ecosystems. All of this comes together and is possible through the events that we host. We host around more than 100 events annually, and I'll certainly get to the kind of events and how we try to make it very relevant for the ecosystem, the investors and the startup founders in the ecosystem. Now, if I talk about the roadmap, right before KiwiTech, the founders of KiwiTech had a pretty-successful exit from their previous organization. It was called Aptara, a content technology company that they scaled to a 5,000 employee organization. They had a pretty-successful exit of 144 million US dollars in 2012. In 2013, we started with the KiwiTech startup program. Now, over the years, we realized the importance of helping our founders raise capital. So we also launched our demo days in 2017. By that time, we had become an ecosystem of more than 100 plus portfolio companies. In 2019, we launched our Startup 808 series, the entrepreneur workshop that you are attending today. We also expanded into the Middle East region. And in the past, 2 years in 2020, 2021, we had already scaled into an ecosystem with more than 500 portfolio companies hosting more than 100 events on an annual basis. We also acquired a finance and accounting organization based out of New York called Graphite Financial. We launched our own go-to-market and crowdfunding services, and there are already 3 acquisitions in pipeline. Now, we are targeting more than 100 companies or portfolio companies to have an exit at least more than 100 million US dollars. Now, KiwiTech is already on track of becoming an ecosystem by 2024 of more than 1,000 plus portfolio companies. Now, if I talk about our services, we do have, of course, technology development as a core service, something that comes out of our heritage. We started off, as a technology development organization, and today we've evolved into an organization with multiple service offerings, depending on your requirement for your startup. Now, in terms of technology development, we have a team of more than 600 engineers currently who've built about more than 2,000 products. And as I mentioned, we do have close to 500 organizations as a part of the portfolio. We also have technical due diligence as another service, along with finance and accounting, which again is supported and completely spearheaded by Graphite Financial, the New York-based organization. We also have events as a service. These are the external events that we host. These are the startup pitch events, workshops, innovation hackathons, investor summits, and conferences we host for a lot of our key partners within the ecosystem. We also have digital marketing as a support, just understanding how much of a support a lot of founders require to take their product from an MVP stage to say a commercial launch or maybe post-revenue stages as well. So we do have that support to provide you with your go-to-market strategies. We also have crowdfunding as a support, as a service. Now, for crowdfunding, we did partner with vFunder and Start Engine just to provide that extra benefit in terms of strategizing your campaigns according to these platforms, or depending on what your requirement of your organization is. So we do have crowdfunding as another service as well. Now, as I mentioned, everything comes together through the events that we host. Now, we try to make it very relevant for the investors and founders by categorizing these events on, say, community specific, hosting a lot of events for Black entrepreneurs, female founders, minority founders, but also industry specific events, along with region specific, dividing East Coast, US into East Coast, demo days, West Coast, Midwest, and a lot of international events as well, along with the stage of your business. So we also hosted one of our biggest pitch event last year. It was called Arena 24-hour virtual pitch event. We hosted our Qatar's first ever e-commerce hackathon. So a lot of events is how we try to bring the investors and founders together. But like those events today, I welcome you all for the Entrepreneur Workshop 808 series. And I really would like to thank our mentors today, Fred and Doug, to really taking out the time and imparting this knowledge with all the founders today. So Fred and Doug, thank you so much for joining us today. And Nosheen, back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karandeep, for the overview. I would now like to invite Fred Cohen, Managing Member, Angel, to exit. The screen is all yours, Fred.
Okay, I just want to start by saying if you have questions, you should ask them along the way. Don't wait until the end. Put them in the Q&A box or in the chat box, and every slide I'll stop except for this one to make sure that I get a chance to answer any questions you have. This is extracted from our workshop on how to sell to investors, and the outline of the workshop talks about this, and I think the same thing should be true in the short talk, but I might miss a few things. So we have to view investors as customers. We want to see it through their eyes. We need to develop a plan to go to investors if we're going to be successful. There are tools that can help you do that. We have a variety of case studies. We're not going to talk through many case studies here today. And the goal ultimately is more investment for less effort. That's what we try to help clients achieve. So getting investments, the first thing to understand is that investors are customers. And like any other customer, you need to sell to them. And if you don't sell to them, then they're not going to buy anything from you. So that's the fundamental. So in that sense, it's no different from any other sort of a sales process. Each one has specific characteristics. If you're pitching to a private equity firm that does $50 million investments at the minimum, and you're trying to get a couple $100,000 for a seed round, it's not going to work. So don't bother. So horses for courses. You need to get a investor company match, just like you need a product market fit, right? So you need to understand them to sell them effectively. They go through buying cycles. So, basically when they're going to do an investment, you need to be there. And if you're not there when they're doing the investment, it doesn't matter how good you are. And if you are there when they're not giving the investment, then that's just a slow wait until they're ready. Basically the bait doesn't matter if the fish aren't biting. And then the other thing is you have to sell to them. No matter how good your mousetrap is, the old saying, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door, is just not true. You could have a really bad mousetrap, but good marketing, and you'll get some customers to buy it from you. So what you're going to need is a go-to-market plan for investors. So we'll call it a go-to-investor plan. So go-to-market plans, generally you're going to involve a set of different things. You're going to need elevator speeches. You're going to have to define the problem you're solving and how you solve it for them. And for an investor, it's their problem is making money from their money. It's not the problem, the technical problem that you're solving for some customer. It's the problem you're solving for the investor. But for the customer, it's a different thing. It's the problem you're solving for that customer. You need to understand your customers and the marketing approach to them. That means understanding how they think, what they think about, why they think that way, and how you're going to influence them to make a decision to invest in you. Sales sieves are very useful. They're useful in tracking what you're doing and in making sure that you succeed. and that when you're not succeeding, you know it in time to make changes. Otherwise, you're going to spend years and not succeed and not know why. You need to deal with competition, not just the competition in the marketplace, but the competition for their investment dollar. Sustainability and impact are very important to a lot of investors. There are a lot of opportunities for investments where they invest once and they get their returns more than once. So those are valuable as well. They all want an exit, but if they get more than one exit and each one makes them a lot of money, that's even better. There's your ability to sell. You have some capacity of being able to sell to investors and the ability to manage that process in your company. You should have a plan going forward, not just this round of investment, but round after round, and how things are going to dilute over time if they are, and how that's all going to work. And then you'll need a data room for yourself to keep track of everything. So one thing to keep in mind is that many investors buy only once, and that's a very big difference between selling to customers who you want to get recurring revenue. You want them to buy again and again and again. Most investors don't invest in the same company again and again and again. And if so, it might be based on they gave you a tranche and they're waiting for you to make some deliverables before they'll give you the next tranche. But it's a sales process that for the most part is get that investment once from any given investor. I'm going to go on to my next slide, but this is where you get to ask questions, and you should ask them if you have them. Are there any in the chat box?
We don't
All
have.
right, hearing none. So fundamentally, it's a sales process, and if it's going to be effective, it has to be controlled. You can't just say, I'm just going to haphazardly go out and talk to everybody I can and see if I can get money. The bigger the deal, the more time it takes. That's an interesting question. It turns out not necessarily. In many cases, it's easier to close a bigger investor than a smaller investor. And that is, there are various reasons. One of them is usually small investors, especially very small investors. It's their money. It's very personal to them. They don't have this impersonal view of investing. Oh, I put my money into the stocks and some win and some lose. I'm not worried about it. They're more likely to be investing in one thing. Oh my goodness, once a year. The average angel investor invests once a year. Average invests $25,000. So you're spending a lot of time and effort for a relatively small amount of money. The other thing that's important here is to close a private investment deal. The CEO almost always has to do it themselves. There's really no substitute. You can't have a salesperson out there selling for you. Maybe the exception is through a broker dealer where they have a relationship with the existing investors. But normally it's the CEO that has to close the sale. And that's much more expensive and time consuming. And you can't have 35 CEOs out there selling for you. You just get you. So the typical fundraising takes 50% or more of the CEO's time. And usually 9 to 12 months to close a round. The next round starts right away. Maybe you're going to present to somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 investors over the course of that period. And if 3 to 5% look more deeply, that means if you presented to 1,000, you get 30 looking more deeply. If you present to 10,000, it's 500. Say 30% of those bother to go into due diligence, which is, that means 9 are going into due diligence with you, or 150 at the top end. Maybe 30% of them invest. That's either 3 to 50 investors. So what we're talking about here is a big sieve, a big sales sieve with a lot of people in the top, and it narrows down to a relatively small number. And then even after you get to the ones that are ready to say yes, just getting the yes, I want to do it, actually closing the deal, that is getting all the paperwork and all the terms finalized and the actual cash in the bank, that typically takes time as well. And then as soon as you get that done, you better be starting the next round because you still need to grow. Unless you've gotten to cash flow positive and profitable, and you're going to grow as fast as you can grow without any more money. If you don't want to manage this process, it will consume you. I've seen many people that spend 50% of their time or more, some say 80% of their time, out there trying to get investors, another after another after another, and it consumes them. They don't have any time to run the company. They end up in bad relationships with their family, maybe get a divorce, who knows. But if you have a good control on it, if you're managing it, you know what you're doing, you're watching it, you're thinking about it, then you can be successful without harming yourself. So basically, this is a sales and marketing process. It has to be tracked and adapted in order to work. It requires expertise and resources and ongoing communications. One of the big mistakes people make is they don't have ongoing communications with their existing and potential future investors. So figuring out how often to communicate and what new to tell them. If you just keep telling them the same thing, yeah, it'll go away. But if you tell them something new every time that looks better and better, and it's truthful, then that's a much better communications. You need a periodic process behind that. In other words, just like any other marketing and sales effort, it's something you have to do in an ongoing fashion. Any questions from here? The appropriate communications cadence. Good question. That just popped up on the window. I was lucky to see it at the bottom. So generally speaking, at least once a quarter for any existing investor, at least once a month for any potential investor. If you go faster than once a week or something like that, unless you're getting close to close, right? Once you're in personal communication, they say, gee, I need this document, you send it to them. That back and forth happens in more or less real time. You want to be very timely with those communications. But I generally think no more often than a week if they're not in regular communications. 2 weeks is better. A month is getting towards the long end. Hopefully that answers the question. Okay, well, if we get another one, let me know. So customer satisfaction is critical. And the reason is investors lead to more investors. Generally speaking, most investors follow other investors. They want somebody else to invest first, and then they'll jump in. So, they'll get deals from other investors. They trust the other investors. They trust their due diligence. Oh, if you checked, that's good enough for me. You're my friend. I know you for a long time. I know you wouldn't invest unless you did this. They view reputation as a strong surrogate. So, my reputation as an investor causes some people to say, well, if Fred invested, that means you're probably pretty good. At least you got through diligence. Other people say, God, Fred invested. I don't want to get anywhere near that. So that reputation inures to the companies of who invested in you. Some will only follow a lead investor, and some will follow almost any lead investor. But most will ask others their point of view, right? So if they know other investors, unless there's somebody just sitting out there investing on their own, they'll ask other people for their viewpoint, and they'll share that information. And so something to keep in mind is that an unhappy investor will spread the word. They'll say, I was very unhappy with these people. I didn't like this. They didn't do that. They didn't keep their promises. A happy investor will only tell their friends, hey, Joe, that's a great opportunity. Don't tell anybody else because, I want to get this round closed at this valuation and get it moved up. All right. And of course, many investors will reinvest if they're happy with the progress, which means that quarterly communication at a minimum to keep them up to date. And of course, the annual communication for financial purposes is sort of critical to keeping them happy and aware of what's going on. So investor relations is like customer relations. Don't just take the money and run. You'll get a bad reputation and they will tell each other. So you're building a company. You do it brick by brick. You need a strong foundation, and capital is one of the foundations of a business. If you don't have enough capital, if you're always, sucking wind and barely able to get to the next day, investors are going to probably shy away and you're going to probably be very stressed. Satisfied investors, on the other hand, help you grow the company, not just with money, with assistance, with advice, with connections. Oh, I'm a happy investor. I just ran across another company and they're buying what you're selling. How about if I get you two together? So that's also very important. Any questions about this?
No, we don't have any questions.
Seeing none. So who are these investors? I'm gonna be drinking on the air. It's V8. There we go. So they're all different. This list on the right is sort of the way we typically classify investors. We group them together for common characteristics. The specifics of each investor will vary, but generally speaking, private equity is in the 50 million plus range. CVC, corporate venture capital, are motivated by strategic issues within the corporation. Family offices are about wealth preservation and so forth. So they each have their own approach and they each want it their way. And usually you're not selling to more than about 2 of those at a time. So we tend to divide them based on how much they invest and how often, the processes they tend to use to decide, the rules they put in place for deal terms, the way they make their decisions, and the things they invest in. So each one has to be sold individually with the exception of crowdfunding, which is more of a mass sale. But the golden rule is who has the gold makes the rules. So critical to going after investors is for you to sieve them out, for you not to just talk to everybody that thinks they have money and you might want to give you money. Yeah, you can't get $10 million from a pauper. You can get $1 from 10 million paupers. But the amount you're raising, the size of the round, the size of the investments you're taking, the number of investors, the area you're investing, all these things act to reduce the investor set that you're looking at. And one of the critical things is you don't have enough time. Really, in a year, if you're going to have 1,000 investors you're talking to one at a time, 250 days a year, because they may not work on the weekends like you do. That means 4 a day, 4 new ones a day that you're going to talk to. And that's quite a push. Best way to find and get in contact. That's a really complicated answer. Simple question. So, well, the best way to get in touch with me is you go to a2e.co and you click on the buttons. But for the most part, there are a variety of different techniques to find investors that are right for you. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later when I think I talk about the platforms. But there are a variety of platforms. There are other ways, search engines, all sorts of ways to try and find them and then narrow them down. So it's like any other sales process, there's a marketplace, there's a set of different marketplaces, and you have to be in the marketplace where they're buying and you're selling. And if you're not in the same marketplace, they won't see you and you won't find them. Okay, why do they buy? They buy for a reason. They want more money than they put in, and they want it sooner rather than later. But it's emotion and reason. There's a balance between them, and emotion is certainly present in every case I've ever seen, right? So it balances differently for different investors. They're usually investing in the jockey and the team. That is the CEO and the team. If they don't care about the CEO and the team, they're probably not a good investor because it doesn't matter what you have. If you don't have somebody competent to run it, who knows how to keep track of your money, they're going to make mistakes. It's all going to fail. So they love to see a good jockey and a team. They're always looking at risk and a reward. And of course, the jockey and the team are a good part of the risk, which gets reduced if it's a good team. And they've done this before in the same field, just recently, just exited. They have another one that's another niche that's non-competitive, but all the knowledge they have, all the connections they have are just perfect for this new one. That's really good. And the reward has to be there. The ability to reach a big market. A lot of people say I won't invest at all if it's not at least a couple $2 billion a year of market. The ability to fulfill the promises. So when you're pitching either to customers or to investors, you're making promises and they're betting on your ability to fill those promises. They're making a bet. So history of filling promises is important to demonstrate that you have the integrity and so forth. There are barriers to entry and exit, right? Barriers to entry keep the competition out. Barriers to exit, otherwise called stickiness, are things that keep the customers with you over time. They want to know the financial plan and how it's engineered. When I say engineered, it's not just I'm going to get money from investors, I'm going to go sell things. Right? You need to combine different sources of financing, revenue, commercial financing, so that the buyer can finance it and give you the cash for the product. And they're paying the financing company, but you have the money. Whether it's a service or a product. The way the cash flow works is critically important. And the proper financial planning allows you to do that without them losing value, them losing the value of their shares by dilution. The other part of that is there are also grants, and there are other ways of getting money, and those other ways of getting money should be in that mix. The legal issues are really part of risk management. If you're doing something illegal, unless you're working, for like, I guess the CIA or the KGB or what is it? Now it's the FSB. Unless you're working for some, government agency that's allowed to break the law, people generally shy away from people breaking the law. And then the match between you and them. Ultimately, if you don't get along with them, they're not going to invest in your company. So they're making a bet, and the bet has to make sense to them. So my graphic here is the second race at Santa Anita. It's a bet sheet. And the bet sheet has, what has to go right, what could go wrong, what are the assumptions, and what are the facts and evidence to support those assumptions, right? What's the information that proves to me, makes sense to me, and not in ultra, whatever tone. It should be something that your grandmother would understand. And if your grandmother is no longer living, my grandmother's no longer living, she's definitely not going to understand it. But anybody should be able to understand this regardless of their level of sophistication. It should be in simple terms. And it's all about how they see the bet. If they see the bet as something that they like and they trust you and they trust the company, then they're likely to invest. And assuming that you're at the right time in the right place. Questions here?
No questions yet.
Okay, hearing none. So how do they buy? They each buy in their own way. Remember, when you're selling to somebody, you have to sell in the way they buy, right? So if they're using purchase orders and you're using credit cards, then it won't work. You have to be able to take their money. And is it a farmer's market or a purchase order? Private equity use individual processes. Corporate venture capital does everything the corporate way. Purchase order, invoice, partial payment, contractual, figures all over the place, large scale, long time approval process with all sorts of people knocking it down. Family offices, they're unique. Each one does it their own way. It's a unique marketplace. Venture capital, similar structured process to corporates. Angels and angel groups, you apply, you present, they go through due diligence, and then you move forward in the process. Friends and family, it's all personal relationships. They like you. And then founders and employee are not to be, shoo-shooed here, poo-poo, whatever. They're very important. Hiring people that are giving their time instead of you paying them, that's an investment in the company. And they should be treated as investors, and their value should be protected. They each use different instruments, or they variously use different instruments. You need to use whatever instrument they're willing to use. And your sales process should match their buying process. That means you need to research how they buy and why they buy and sell to them in the right way. So, there are commonalities that are often present, but each investor is unique. And, how much time do you have available to spend with each? Think about it. If you're talking to 1,000 in a year, then, it's only a couple hours each if that's all you do as the CEO. So you want to get no's as quickly as possible. The ones that are not going to invest, you need to get them out of your way so you can talk to the ones that are likely to invest. You need to use that sieve to cut those numbers down and keep track of how much time and effort you're spending. And how many go through the whole sieve, and how fast will they get there? How much time does it take? How much effort do you put in for each? To be successful, you need a plan, and you need to adapt the plan as you go. So just to reiterate, you have to sell how they buy, or they won't buy from you. Questions?
None.
Hearing none. So I had this list before of the different things you're going to need, and I think I'll be talking about that just a little bit more. Some things are different from selling to other customers. For one thing, it's for closing sales over a 9 to 12 month period, right? Almost never are you going to close a sale in 5 or 10 minutes or a half hour or an hour or a day. It takes time, more time than typical other sorts of sales, certainly more than a retail sale or something like that. Less time than selling fleets of airliners. Those take 20 years. Complex terms and conditions. These contracts are not trivial, they're not simple. You need to pay attention to them. And the CEO is doing the sales. Those are different from other kinds of sales that you typically encounter. So you're going to need a plan. And just for clarity, this is not a business plan. Okay, you're going to need one of those as well, but this is not that. This is your investment sales plan, just like any other sales and marketing plan. If you have a standard way you go about sales and marketing from somebody that knows how to do this, you want that same concept, that same underlying set of things that you need to prepare. You're going to need literature, you're going to need the right communications plan, and so forth. The customers are investors, and the items for sale, of course, are the ownership of the company. So before I go into what's included, I just thought here's the list of what they usually want. They usually want an executive summary, something that looks like that picture on the right. We have a tool called GWiz that produces those. But this was taken from a lot of other executive summaries that we've seen from different investors and investment groups. And the idea is in 1 to 3 minutes, they're going to be able to look at this and say, I'm not interested, or I want more information. That saves you time. It saves them time. They're not going to look for 15 minutes through something they don't understand right away and try and figure it out. They want something that they can see, that they understand. They know what the questions mean. They know what the answers mean. And they can look at it right away and say, oh, no, not interested. It's not my area of investment. The financials don't look like financials I invest in. The round is too big. The round is too small. The pre-money's too big. The pre-money's too small. The return on investment isn't high enough. It takes too long to get there. They need to be able to see this and get out of the deal, and you need them to get out of the way so you can talk to somebody that is really interested. You're going to need a pitch deck and a detailed deck, and they are not the same thing. You're going to need sometimes videos. I'm not a big fan of videos during a presentation. If you're giving a pitch, try not to do a video, unless it's something where a video is the only way to understand it. You shouldn't do a video. And there are lots of reasons. One of them is something can go wrong, or, oh, wait, I'm pushing the button. It isn't showing. What's going on? You're delaying. You're creating havoc. If the video doesn't show quite that well over the network or on that screen that day, it's just trouble, right? You want to get clear communication between you, your brain, your mind, your eyes, your lips, your ears, and theirs, so that you're talking to them and you're getting in a relationship with them that's going to move them from here to there. Metrics are very important. A lot of investors like them if you have them. If you don't have them, somebody who has them, it's an advantage. You're going to end up doing diligence some way or another. They're going to do some level of diligence. And so having a pre-made due diligence report is very helpful for reducing the number of questions you get, for answering those questions quickly, and for assuring them that you know what you're doing. They're going to want data room access to some data room that has additional facts. They're going to need copies of contracts. They're going to want to see, what your sales look like. Whatever they're going to look for, they're going to ask a question, and either you're rummaging around trying to find the data and then making copies, or somehow scanning them and sending, or looking through the directory structure on your computer to find that old record, or you're going to have it in place ahead of time. And it also, by the way, helps you run your business well to have that information at the tip of your fingers. It's going to take CEO time and effort, and you're going to have to answer their questions. So again, are you interested is the question that this answers, and the initial time is 1 to 3 minutes that they're going to spend saying, I'm interested or not. And you should get a summary however you get it. Okay, when you do a slide deck, now remember I told you there are 2 slide decks. There's the pitch deck that you use for 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute, 8 minute, whatever pitch. Then there's the deck that explains, the detailed deck that explains the company. Essentially, it's a detailed briefing that answers the vast majority of their questions and should cover all of the key things that they want to know. This is an example of, we have a tool that does this. Well, it's a tool that helps a person do this. We can't automatically look at your deck and give you a good score or sensible score. We look at it and we use the evaluation criteria, and we rate those depending on what's where and when. This is an evaluation that we did for a company that's currently going through the investor push process that we run. And this was the first deck that they sent us, and we're reviewing the second version. And by the third version, most of this will be green or orange. And they'll be, instead of being at 44%, they'll be at 90 or 95%. And then their deck will be ready. Again, not just for the quick pitch, but for the long explanation, the half-hour meeting or something like that that they're going to have. And so the goal here is to understand how they're going to view you, and understand what to present to them so they'll get the answers to their questions. And by the way, if there's a question you don't want to answer, tough. Figure out a good answer. If the answer is we don't do that, we're not planning to, then say so. It's that simple. The truth, the honest truth really helps. Question about this?
We don't have any.
Hearing none. So due diligence, I mentioned due diligence, and many of you have heard of it. Some of you may have been, unhappy enough to go through it, maybe more than once. What due diligence means is reasonable and prudent, okay? And here are some actual, dictionary definitions, and there's a legal definition or various legal definitions. It's situation dependent, has to be seriously considered by somebody with the proper expertise in light of history. That's what the person that should be doing diligence should be doing. And I like this definition a lot. In relation to an undertaking, use of skill, diligence, prudence, and foresight, reasonably and ordinarily exercised by a skilled and experienced person, complying with recognized standards and applicable laws of the same type of undertaking under the same circumstances and conditions. In other words, what everybody else does. Whatever they do, it's good enough for you. I like to think of it this way. Imprudent is leaving $1 million in cash on a table, unguarded, right behind a regular window with nothing preventing you from seeing through the window. And that window's in a back alley with no cameras and no alarms and no response force. So somebody walks along, with a rock outside the window. They pick up the rock, they throw it through the window, they put the cash in their sack and they walk away. That would be imprudent. Okay. Now, unreasonable would be having 500 video cameras all looking at the same thing, all at the same time, all the time. Because what's the 500th actually doing that the 499th didn't do, and so forth. So unreasonable is just too much. Imprudent is not enough. So somewhere between not enough and too much is reasonable and prudent. And it's different for different investors for different circumstances. If I'm investing $10,000, I'm going to do some level of diligence. If $10,000 is really important to you, you're going to suffer my due diligence. If it's not, you're going to say, look, it's not worth it for your 10 grand. I'll go to somebody else who won't look as hard. Okay. On the other hand, what's worth $10,000 to me, somebody who's a billionaire, probably, $10 million means as much to them as 10,000 means to me. Or maybe not, maybe every dollar means a lot to them, but probably not. So due diligence, you're going to have to go through it. Any questions about this? Okay. We have a set of tools that we use that take a portfolio view and zoom down into the executive summary, and from there down into due diligence, from there into the data room. And what you see at the bottom right there is a document. In this case, it's the incorporation papers. So when we run through our process, we put things into this form so we can look at it and the CEO can look at it, and they can find all the information they're looking for, and we can find the information we're looking for. And that's what it takes, to be prepared for diligence, truly prepared. If you're not prepared, several things are likely to happen. One of them is you're going to end up spending lots and lots of time answering questions, and those answers will not be at the tip of your tongue. And if it delays you too much, if they ask a question and you can't get back immediately with just the answer, all right, then you're in trouble if it's a simple question. If it's something asking for documents, I'm on the road today, I'll be back Wednesday. How about if I get you it all on Wednesday? Let's make a list, and you get it all on Wednesday. That's probably okay for most investors. But if you can't generate the documents, if you're making it up as you go and you're not prepared, they're going to recognize that. And they're going to say, oh, well, when you're ready, let me know, which really means no, thank you, go away. So you should create this in advance and provide it and have it available to you so you can answer their questions and answer your own questions and keep track of your own business. Any questions about that?
None yet.
Hearing none. Okay. Here's what the funding process looks like. This is a typical angel process. There are different processes for different, levels and types of groups, but basically this is Keiretsu Forum, the most active private equity investment group in the world as of a couple of years ago. I was a founding chapter president in the Pebble Beach chapter. I am no longer affiliated with it, but their process is sort of typical. So for each funding source, you find them. So you have to find them. You have to apply to present. They do deal screening to figure out which ones they really want to look at. If you're a fit, they'll invite you. You pitch to them. If some of them are interested, then you follow up with them. They're not going to rush to follow up with you. You follow up with them, start the due diligence process, get lots of questions and answer them, complete the due diligence, and some of them may or may not invest. That's the process. Here's a sense of time frame. This is one that one of their chapters put up that said, oh, it's 4 weeks, right? It's not 4 weeks. Here's week 4 here. So it takes about 10 days to find and vet, a couple of qualified sources, about a day to apply to present, 15 days before the committee reviews it, another 7 to 37 days, depending on whether you hit their monthly schedule or not. For deal screening, you present, that's going to be 2 weeks later. Due diligence, another 60 days. A lead investor puts the money in the bank for you, another 30 days. 70% of the round is closed about 150 days. Maybe their fund where if enough of them invest, the fund will come in and invest another 30 days later and the round closes. So you're looking at something like 9 months or more to close a round. Okay, but I have to tell you, angel groups are efficient, especially the larger ones. And the reason they're efficient is because you may pay to present, you may pay $10,000 by the time it's done to present to 400 investors. But on the other hand, that's $25 each. Compare that to trying to find and take 400 investors out to lunch one at a time. You know, it'll take you the better part of a year, maybe 2 years. And, you know, so it's just a much more efficient process. All right, so if the data bank is fully complete, we'll do, and I don't get the rest of that question because I didn't quite see it all pop up the chat box. Will it still take 60 days? Yeah, 60 days is if you're ready. Okay, 60 days is like the best time to get through due diligence. So I've done it in 30 days with somebody who's ready and has all the answers to the questions, and then we go through and I fill out my forms with them. And then, you know, once we do that, we get all the data to support it, and I spend the time and effort, we're through. But 60 days is a rarity to get it through in 60 days if you're ready, because you remember, they're not all exactly ready. They don't have, you know, all the time in the world to spend with that. 90 days is sort of the other end of the spectrum. When it gets to 90 days, they start saying, well, you know, I don't even remember who you were. Who were you? So, so yeah, it'll still take 60 days. They have defined processes, and usually it's a scalable sales process. That's why you go to groups. Much more efficient than individuals. On the other hand, you know, angel groups are running at the $25,000 once per year per member. And, you know, the total round size is typically for the first round, 750, 800,000, something like that, against a $7 or $8 million pre-money valuation. So when you're beyond that, you can't go to those angel groups. You may be able to go back to the groups that you've been to before, and they may do follow-on investments, but you're not going to get, you know, 20 million from them in almost any case. And there are lots of other processes out there. That's just an example. So whatever their process is, you're going to have to live with it. Okay, so you have to build this content. It doesn't build itself. So whatever you have, if this is what you're trying to get, you're going to have to get from here to there. Now, we've done this about 50 times in the last, you know, 5 or 6 years, something like that. So about, on average, a little bit less than one a month. Here's what happens. 50% of the time, they never arrive at there when they start here. Okay, they will just, it's too much rigor, right? They're not used to this. They don't have enough knowledge to answer all those questions. They just don't know that. And worse yet, they try to say, well, you know, okay, I need to know about data privacy because I have some big database on the internet that I'm creating for my SaaS software. So what's my privacy protection program? Well, they don't have a clue what that is. So what they do is they'll go out and just find some copy of a privacy protection or a disaster recovery plan. They'll copy it down. They won't even fill it out. Well, no, that's not a plan to survive a disaster. A plan is we have enough redundancy in the right places, and we've done, you know, we have these processes in place that regularly keep it up to date and verify. It's a process. And if you're not doing that, then you can't explain it by copying some document from somewhere. And the other thing is, if you copy the document and you don't understand it and do it, then it won't help. You'll have an actual disaster and you won't recover. Maybe the effort's too high. Or another thing that happens is we find out the business won't work. You start working through the diligence and you get to some point and you ask a couple of questions and they realize, you know, I'm losing 50 cents on every dollar now, but if I really scale it up, I'm only going to lose 10 cents on every dollar. Well, wait a minute. No, that's not going to work. We need something that makes money, not something that loses less. I actually had a company say when they get to $2 billion in sales, this is a startup, when I get to $2 billion in sales, then every dollar that comes in, I'll make $1.05. So, but until then, I'll be losing money. All right, you know, so I'm not ready to take that bet. Or the other thing is I don't need all this because my such and such is so good that people will just jump in and invest without knowing any of that stuff. And, you know, I'm not going to invest, and nobody I know is going to invest without you being able to answer their questions and demonstrate you know what you're doing and you know what you're talking about. And you've thought about how to do this. And you have a team of people that are going to do it well. So of the 50% that arrive, half of those find a better way, right? One thing that happens while you go through diligence with them is they get a better financial engineering plan in place, and maybe they don't need you. Okay, good. Another one is sometimes the trade-off favor natural growth. So, okay, gee, if I go through this path with money in 5 years, I'll get out and have 90% of the company, right? Without money. If you give me money, I'll get out in 3 years and I'll have 30% of the company. Well, hey, I'll wait the extra 2 years and make 4 times as much money. So actually, when you go figure it out, you find out that things are different than you imagine. Another one is some of them find deals that bypass the equity. Hey, I needed $2 million to do this. I just made a $5 million sale with 50% margin. Hey, that gives me $2.5 million. I don't need that investment. I have the cash from the sale. I'm good to go. And then the other one is major pivots. They just change direction and it's no longer what they were talking about before, so they don't need the same stuff. So what happens here is by getting systematic, by you going through the diligence process internally, you're going to learn a lot more about your company. You're going to know better what its real value is and be able to demonstrate that to others and have the evidence to support it. Any questions about that?
No questions yet.
All right. So we talk about a sales sieve for investment. This is an actual sales sieve from one of our current clients that's going through our investor push program. And they've already closed the previous round and the sales are underway, and they have a lead VC investors that are committed and they're in the closing process. The goal is to close 300,000 more in 100 days. So this is just a sales. If it says, you know, the first line is you get 80 leads over a period of 30 days and it'll cost you $55 each. Okay, so it's going to cost you $4,400. Why does it cost that money? Because the CEO's time is involved and the CEO's time is worth some amount. Even if they're working for free, you know, they're not doing everything else during that time. So that's the value they put, and it takes time, 40 hours of their time, okay? So 75% of those will go to a first presentation. And that's plus or minus 20%. We don't really know. It could be anything from 55% to 80, 95%. And we're going to find out as we execute the sales sieve. And in the next step, they do their first presentation. You know, the same thing. There's a probability that they'll want the second meeting after that and so forth. Every step takes time. It takes resources. Some of them don't get through to the other side. You know, time adds up. So here we are at 104 days at the end of this thing. And if things don't go well, they will have spent $18,000. Is that right? Yeah, about $18,000. Taken 104 days, taken 170 hours of CEO time and brought in $6,900 net. Not very good. On the top end, they will bring in, you know, $1 million and spent, you know, more time, 6 times more hours on it, but the same number of days to end. So what happens here is along the way, you know, the first so many days, you're supposed to get this many leads and 75% are supposed to go on. Well, what if you only get half that many good leads that are qualified leads and only 30% go on? Well, you better adjust the sieve now before you wait 105 days. You adjust the sieve and you find out, all right, either I need more leads or I need to increase the probability. I need to change something to be successful. So it gives you time to make changes. Instead of finding out too late, it didn't work, you find out what's going on along the way, just like a sales sieve that you would use to sell to customers, but you're selling to investors. Questions about that in the chat box? We're running low on time. I only have, sorry, go ahead.
We don't have any question yet.
No questions, that's fine. I'm just letting people know if you don't get them in now, we won't have time at the end. Optimizing the process. So there are 2 ways I know of to save all this time and extra. Actually, there's a third way. If you can afford an employee and have an employee that knows what they're doing and is trained at this and has the skills of this and has done this before, and you get all the information together, then you can just do it yourself. Instead of the CEO doing the first part of the sales sieve, the employee does it. And the CEO just comes in when it starts to be actual communication with potential investors. The other 2 paths are broker dealers and our investor push program. I don't know of any other programs that do it the way we do it. So the broker dealer is legally authorized, right? They're whoever it is, SEC, I guess, approves them as broker dealers. They get investigated. There's a lot of stuff they have to do. They're required to take due diligence for their clients. They get a percentage of the raise amount, usually like a 25K or more upfront fee plus 8%, something like that of the investment. And they sell to their clients who are investors. And they'll actually close some of the sales for you or get very close to closing the sales in many cases. So you don't have to do, except of course, going through the diligence process with them, much of the effort. Here's the math of it. If you're raising $1 million at a $9 million pre-money, you get $1 million and you give 10%. You're giving 10% of the company for that $1 million. If you go it through a broker dealer, they're going to take, let's say they take 10%. So instead you raise 1.1 million with a $10 million pre-money. You still get the same $1 million. You still give up 10% of the company. It's just worth 10% more according to your asserted valuation. So it doesn't hurt you at all. They get their money, and it's a really good process. And the only problem is if you're not raising enough money, then they can't make enough money to pay their expenses because they're taking the risk of getting the investors. The other side of this is we have basically a CEO support service that helps develop the go-to-investor plan. It does the top of the sales sieve, just the top. So, that thing where you get 80 leads every month and you sieve it down to where it's however many that you actually present to. So finding the good investors, the ones that are likely to be a good fit, and throwing away all the baloney where you just present and they, Randy Williams of Caritzo Forum calls them looky-loos. They like to look at lots of stuff, but they never invest, right? Wasting your time and theirs. So we try to get rid of those. It takes whatever it is, $2.5K a month for 6 months, saves about half the CEO time. So you would use this when a broker dealer won't take it because it's too small, or you're in some specialized field, so they're not likely to have many investors in that specialized field. Or if you can't afford 25,000 plus up front for their service to get started. So those are the options that I know of to replace your own time with their time. Usually we get doctors and lawyers and people that, are making so much money that spending half of their time doing this in their new company is costing them way more than if they just outsourced it. So more leads, more better leads, less CEO time. Finally, I don't want to say goodbye without leaving you with the paperwork. You're going to need 2 things to close no matter what. You're going to need legal documents codifying the deal and the financial information to establish ground truth. Otherwise, I don't know anybody that will close the deal. Okay, so you want a lawyer that specializes in this area. A general business lawyer. It's a very tricky, investment law is very tricky, very specialized. Lots of things can go wrong. And a good lawyer should have good templates. They don't do everything from scratch for you. They should know what goes wrong, help avoid big mistakes, and have good insurance just in case. Those are the fundamentals. By the way, when you get a private placement memorandum, read every word and make sure you understand it. The words may not mean what you think they mean. Check with your lawyer. By the way, a couple of articles on a2e.co. 2020-03 is about, how does this dilution thing work exactly? And the other one is classes of stock and preferences. You definitely want to read these before you go into this process of getting people to give you money in exchange for equity. As an investor, you probably want to do it too. The other one is use a CPA as your accountant, right? Or if you're not in the US, the appropriate certified accountant. They will, and you should want to get GAAP books, generally accepted accounting practices, someone to watch over the money of the investors. They're going to want somebody that they can believe in and trust, and somebody that gets brutally punished if they lie, cheat, or steal, because they will not be able to continue practicing their profession if they get caught. Someone to report quarterly to them, checks and balances on transactions so that they don't see any way for you just to take the money and run. And so you want an insured independent accountant. I say this, however, I know lots of investors, and some of them tell me, there is the dumb money. Okay. The dumb money, that's people that just throw money over the wall, don't really know what they're doing, but they just keep doing it. And my view is you don't want those investors. And the reasons are 2. One of them is they will sue you later. And the other one is they won't help you succeed. So again, get a good lawyer and a good accountant. Just going to put up the last page, more information. Go to a2e.co. There's free videos, free articles. There's a mailing list. There's free monthly discussions, workshops, and short courses. There's going to be a how to sell to investors course on Tuesday, October 25th. Registration's open now. You can learn from the events and so forth. Any questions?
Thank you, Fred. That was a great presentation. We do have some questions. What makes for the perfect pitch?
There is no such thing. There is actually on our videos, we have a video that talks about how to pitch to investors. And there's this thing called the perfect pitch, where they tell you this many minutes of, if you have 5 minutes, this many seconds on this and that many seconds on this other thing. What works like any other sales process is the thing that the customer, the investor finds compelling. In the first 10 seconds, they should say, oh, that's interesting. And the other one should say, oh, yuck, I'm not interested at all, and go away so they don't ask you stupid questions, right? And then, you're going to want to include all those things that were on that list of different content for the long briefing. For the short briefing, you're opening a sale, you're not closing a sale. So what you want to do is get them to the point where they're ready to ask more questions and they want to. And so it's starting the process. Does that make sense?
All right. How much of my time is required to get funding?
50% of the CEO's time for 9 to 12 months for a typical first round, and every other round, same thing, until you go public. And then it's 100% of your time talking to investors because you're CEO of a public company.
How long will it take to fill my round?
9 months to 12 months, typical.
Right. Thank you, Fred, for the great presentation and all the responses.
Thank you all. If you have any questions, send me an email, a2e.co. There's a button you can click to send an email.
Thank you.